Hello, everybody. Good morning. This is Andrew from Polo Reef, continuing on our quarantine disease. A lot of people have given me great feedback on this. The more we get involved in this, the more things we tend to forget. And so this particular episode, we are really going to be focusing on two diseases, Ick and Velvet. In other words, the scientific name is cryptocarine irritants and odynium immaridum. Hi everybody, Andrew here from Polo Reef. Over the years, we have learned a lot about reef keeping. We are ready to pass that information and knowledge off to you. We are going to be taking many concepts of the commercial aquarium and bringing them to the hobbyists. Welcome to Polo University. Last time we stopped, I think, at cross-contamination. And we talked about having two separate things for your display and your quarantine tank so you don't introduce parasites into your display tank. I also want to extend that into two things. One is your hands. Don't go be playing around in your quarantine tank with your hands and then have them wet and then go into your display tank. Your hands must be rinsed with fresh water. I'd put peroxide on your hands. I'd have them dry for 20, 30, 40 minutes before I did that. So hands are very important. Second thing is the actual distance between your quarantine tank and your display tank. There is evidence that shows vapors and evaporation, little water droplets traveling through the air can actually cause cross-contamination. And apparently the safe distance is at least 10 feet away. So don't be putting your quarantine tank right next to your display tank, especially if it doesn't have a cover. And on that front, we really want you to have a cover, a net, some sort of egg crate on your quarantine tank to prevent the fish from jumping out. A lot of fish are jumpers. We don't want to lose fish that way. Okay, with that in mind, let's start up with Ick and Velvet.
The process you're about to see is what works here at Polo Reef. Our method is designed specifically for our tanks and is not the only method that works. Take time to understand your system and make decisions that will work for you. Polo Reef is not responsible for decisions made in your own home aquarium.
I just wanted to get into some general signs of a sick fish. These include, and you should watch for this, whether you shop at a local fish store or in your quarantine tank. One, the fish is not eating. Make sure your fish eat. If you go to a local fish store, make them feed them for you. A fish that doesn't eat is a fish that usually is in trouble. Two, heavy breathing. That's distress in the gills. It could be ick, it could be velvet, it could be a fluke, but it's not good. If the fish are breathing labored, that's a problem. Listlessness. A fish just sits there, particularly in the flow, trying to get oxygen near the surface or on the bottom. That's a no-no. Don't buy that fish. That fish has a problem. Many fish that have external parasites will be scratching on the bottom, on rocks. They'll flash when they do it. If you go to a local fish store and you see a fish that scratches on the gravel, it's a sign that it has an infection somewhere. Constantly hiding, particularly in the dark, not the greatest sign. Doesn't mean everything. Could be a shy fish, could have just come in, but you want the fish out, open, and eating. Then there are the big ones that really represent Ick and Velvet. An ick, you'll get what looks like salt, grains of salt on the fish. This is different from Velvet, which looks a little bit more like the fish has been barreled into a jar of powdered sugar. is my best explanation. You've seen the pictures on the internet of, most of you already know the difference. I can tell the difference. I can see it in the groups. They look a lot alike, but velvet or odinium is much more lethal, and we're going to talk about that. There are other signs internal that we're going to get into at another time. For now, let's focus on Ick and Velvet and what to do about it. And this also will go in a direction of what happens if you have Ick and Velvet in your reef tank, as opposed to a new fish coming in. So let's start with Ick, Cryptocaryon irritans. It has a 30+ day life cycle. It has several stages. Essentially, the parasite attaches to the fish. Could be the body, could be the gills. The white dots that you actually see that look like salt is actually not the parasite. The parasite burrows down deeper in the epidermis. So those who say clean our ass will clean those dots up, they're not getting to the ick.
To have a better understanding of ick, first we need to go through its life cycle. The infection stage. During the infection stage, the free-swimming thurons actively seek out a host to prey upon. This phase is critical for the parasite. Failure to find a host within 48 hours leads to starvation and death. The feeding stage. Upon finding a host, the thuron attaches itself and transforms into a trophont. The trophont then burrows into the host and begins consuming its flesh. This stage is characterized by the appearance of small white salt-sized dots on the host skin, indicating infection. The drop-off stage. After 3 to 9 days of feeding, the trophont disengages from the host, becoming a protomont. Within a brief 2 to 8 hour window, the parasite moves to the substrate to initiate reproduction. The reproduction stage. Embedded in the substrate, the parasite, now known as tomont, starts generating anywhere from 200 to 1,000 or more child cells, referred to as tomites. This stage often misleads hobbyists into thinking they've eradicated ick, as the parasite can remain dormant on the substrate for 3 to 72 days without manifesting signs of infection in the fish. Upon hatching, the tomont releases its offspring into the water column to seek out new hosts, perpetuating the cycle anew. Moving on, let's give the set back to Andrew to further discuss how to deal with marine ick. Take it away, Mr. Sandler.
The medications that we deal with, copper power, and I'm going to tell you why we like this one, chloroquine phosphate, and even formalin, which actually acts very differently. Most medications act only on the free swimming stage. That means when they're in the when they're in their cystic stage, there's no effect, which means we have to treat this disease like its life cycle, and we have to hit it when we get free swimmers. And the only way to do that is to maintain proper levels of medications throughout the life cycle. Now, there's really a few ways of doing this. Let me explain 3 of them. One is the method of get the copper up to the appropriate level, and we're going to discuss these coppers and the levels in another episode. But you get these up to the therapeutic level, and you maintain them there for the entire life cycle, which is 30+ days. Some people go 32, 34 days, but 30 days for sure, clean, no dots. Fish are eating. The second way of doing this, there are theories that, and the theory is true, that within 2 weeks, most of all of these will have dropped off. So if the fish is clean for 2 weeks and the cysts erupt with free swimmers and you're killing them as they're free swimming with the copper, that 2 weeks offers enough protection for the fish as long as you move that fish out into a new sterile system after the second week. Don't go taking the copper out after 2 weeks and keep them in the same tank. That will not work. They must be clean for 2 weeks with the therapeutic copper. If that copper level drops below therapeutic levels at any time during those 2 weeks, you must start over. If you introduce a new fish into the quarantine system while this is taking place. The clock starts over. This is very important and very easy as long as we stay at 2.5 or thereabouts for either 2 weeks clean and then moving the fish, or 32 days. The best way to check the copper concentration level is a Hannah checker. In fact, of all the checkers that we use, a Hannah, the copper one gives us the least trouble. It's very easy to use. You dump the powder in, you hit the button, get a Hannah test kit. It works with copper power extremely well. Whereas Seachem, their cupramine, they have different test kits for their particular copper, and that copper, the therapeutic level is 0.5. It's a little more harsh on the fish, and frankly, I think less stable. So this is our choice in copper. 32 days at 2.5. You don't make any mistakes, the ick should be gone. Make sure you're not cross-quarantining. Make sure nothing else goes in there while that 32 days is going on. If not, start counting backwards and restart the clock. Third way is what we call tank transfer, where the fish is being moved every 3 days to a new tank or a new sterile tank. It could be the first tank you used and you just sterilized it after you use the second tank, but you probably need at least 2 tanks. And you're moving the fish very carefully in a net, not dripping water into the second system. And the theory and thesis goes, parasites drop off and stay in that system that you no longer are using. And now the fish is in a new sterile system where it may drop more off and you're moving them again. And this happens 4 to 5 times every 3 days. Very good for ick. For velvet, has some complications. Another way people treat ick with reasonable success is lowering the salinity. To lower the salinity rather quickly, but not take it up quickly. Remember that. You probably could take it down 3 times as quick as raise it up. And the salinity has to be below, on the left side of your refractometer, below 1.1. So it has to be 1.08, 1.09. And it has to be held there for 30 plus days. And in those 30 plus days, things can go wrong. Bacterial infections happen. Your pH drops. You may have to use a buffer, a marine buffer, almost every day to maintain pH. But this is an effective way without using medication. So that's my ick talk from a quarantine perspective. Now, what happens if you get it in a display tank? Panic and freak? Maybe. Is it spread over everywhere? Can you get your fish even out of the reef tank? You can't add any of these meds to a reef tank. So you either have to get them out and leave the tank empty of all fish for at least 6 weeks so the parasite burns itself out. I know there's 72 days, there's 76 days. Those were done with strains that were a little bit of colder water. So if you raised your display tank to 80 degrees or 81 degrees while there are no fish in there and just coral, you get the fish out, you treat them separately. 6 weeks should be plenty of time for the cycle to burn itself out. So now we're gonna continue this conversation and deal with something I hope you never have to deal with. Any reefer's nightmare. This is the disease called velvet. It's a dinoflagellate parasite that multiplies very quickly, causes significantly more damage to the fish than cryptocarina or ick. Many people confuse it. Frankly, if you start losing fish very quickly, well, let's talk about the signs and the symptoms, okay? A white coated, sugary, you can't count the dots. They're smaller. The fish seems listless. They are rapidly breathing. They're probably not eating. They're slow to react to stimulus. The fish have very little time with this disease. So the quarantine for it is different than ick. And in my opinion, the treatment in a hospital tank should also be different. We talked about in the beginning how we like to give new fish formalin baths when they come in to the quarantine system. That's this right here, formalin 37% with about 15% methanol, usually between 11 and 15%. You can buy it on Amazon. Make sure you check the expiration date. This stuff does go toxic. And make sure that when you shine a light at the bottom, it's nice and clear. You do not want to see any cloudiness. It's also carcinogenic. I want you wearing eye goggles, glasses, gloves, and doors open for fumes. It's not for the faint of heart. What formalin does is gives the fish a chance. It acts right away at their gills and kills the parasite, or at least reduces them so that they don't suffocate while you wait for the copper to work on free swimmers. You can't wait for free swimmers in velvet. Okay, that's why people use formalin or chloroquine phosphate. Chloroquine phosphate goes at velvet very quickly, even more quickly than copper. We're going to talk about these medicines and how to dose them again, probably after we go through these diseases.
To have a better understanding of velvet, first we need to go through its life cycle. The dinospore stage. Marine velvet begins its life cycle as dinospores, which are free-swimming, infective stage of a parasite. These dinospores are released into the water column and actively seek out suitable hosts. The trophont stage. Once the dinospores find a host, they attach themselves to the host skin or gills and enter the trophont stage. During this stage, the parasite burrows into the host tissue and begins feeding on the host. This stage is characterized by the presence of the parasite within the host tissues, leading to symptoms of infection. The tomont stage. After a period of feeding and development, the trophonts mature into tomonts. These are cysts that detach from the host and settle on various surfaces within the aquatic environment, such as substrate or equipment. It then undergoes division and produces numerous dinospores, restarting the life cycle by releasing infected dinospores into the water column. Moving on, let's give the set back to Andrew to further discuss how to deal with velvet. Take it away, Mr. Sandler.
There are several ways of treating velvet. The favorite way is to actually combine copper power with formalin in the same quarantine. That dosage, I'll just give it to you, is roughly 1 milliliter per 10 gallons. And if your copper level is up there above 2.0 with copper power, some people will dose 10% less, essentially 0.9 mils per 10 gallons. Some people will dose it daily, every day for 10 days or 2 weeks, while the copper stays steady at 2.3, 2.5. Some people will take the fish out and give it baths 2 to 3 times a week and only dose the formalin every 48 hours or every 3 days into the tank. We're gonna have a discussion with somebody here that does it that way. The other way is a little more aggressive, where you're dosing it daily into your quarantine with the copper. I want to tell you that formalin is not easy on your biological filter. You're probably going to get ammonia, which is another problem, but can also be solved by C-Chem Prime or water changes. We like to do the water changes because the formalin sort of clouds the tank up and the Prime clouds the tank up, and they both probably suck oxygen out. Make sure you aerate your quarantine very aggressively with formalin. Chloroquine phosphate will go at velvet also. I recommend you guys get this. I know a lot of people don't, whether it's for cost reasons or they're afraid to dose it because they can't measure it. But we will get to how we do it and how we measure it and make sure it stays at therapeutic dose later at a different episode. The point I want to make on Velvet is this. Copper alone, not going to give you enough time. The fish will suffocate, most likely. Copper plus formalin and a formalin bath gives you a way better chance. If you get Velvet in your display, you got to get those fish out because they're going. And they're going to go like dominoes. Catching fish is not easy in a reef tank, but get them out and get that tank empty. Get them fallow. 6 weeks is the fallow period for Velvet, which means you can have no fish in your tank. You can have coral, which means also you're going to have to feed your coral more because you have no fish in there. So don't forget that. You might have to dose nitrate and phosphates because you don't have fish in there. But the fish are treated in a separate quarantine tank. And I said to you to have 2 tanks is better than 1, only because when you have Velvet, you got to get them all out. And there may be too much bioload for 1 tank. In addition, the formalin and or the chloroquine is much rougher on the biological filter than just this copper power. So ammonia, ammonia, ammonia. Get an ammonia alert badge from CChem. Test the API kit. Make sure it's yellow. Sometimes it gives you a false color. Doesn't matter. Prime it anyway. My suggestion on Velvet is to make sure it doesn't enter into the quarantine to begin with. And the way we do that is the formalin bath at the beginning. 30 to 45 minutes in a 5-gallon, big aerated bucket of salt water, fresh salt water. You want to aerate that water before for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, heavy. You want to add the formalin very carefully, 4 milliliters per 5 gallons of water. Some people will even go 5 for 5. I don't think you need it. The bath, the aeration stays heavy in the bath while the fish is in there, and 30 to 45 minutes depending how the fish is doing. The fish then goes back into the quarantine where there should be copper, and if it has Velvet or you suspect Velvet, get it up to therapeutic concentrations quickly. This is not a time to take chances. You suspect Velvet, I'm adding that formalin and copper together right from the beginning. Watch your bioload, watch your biofilters, watch your ammonia. Get the copper up to therapeutic levels very quickly and dose that formalin. Again, just about 1 milliliters per 10 gallon. And you could do that daily, or you could do it every 48 hours and alternate a bath. So maybe it's getting 2 to 3 baths a week and getting dosed with formalin in the quarantine 2 to 3 times a week. That's another way to do it. Velvet is probably the #1 killer of this hobby. It takes out a lot of hobbyists. Don't let it happen to you. This is the reason we quarantine. This one disease. Interesting enough, formalin also works on Bruxella as well as urinema. So by combining these 2 medications together, copper and formalin, you hit those 2. And we'll get into those diseases next episode. Same with chloroquine phosphate, guys. Bruxella and urinema. This med's like a miracle med. The problem is we can't measure it easily. And there is an art to using it. I also want to talk to you about tank transfer method, which we talked about in hyposalinity. Do not try hyposalinity with Velvet. It ain't going to work. Okay, so it's for Ick and not for Velvet. Tank transfer method by itself is a way better treatment for just Ick. If you're going to use tank transfer for Velvet, what people do is in between transfers, you're giving the fish a bath before it goes into the next tank. And that bath can be hydrogen peroxide, or it could actually be formalin also. That may be a way of doing tank transfer and dealing with the velvet. Personally, it's not my favorite because you really want those fish in as much formalin and control as possible. But if you're gonna do it, you do the bath in between the transfers. So that's sort of this episode, guys. And we'll be back next time with Euronema, Brook, and flukes. And then we have to cover bacterial infections and the antibiotics for those. Please note also that Ick and Velvet being confused. Some people confuse Velvet with Brucanella. They look a lot alike in the later stages.
The medications discussed in this video are what have and haven't worked for Polo Reef. These are based on experiences and sharing of knowledge in the saltwater fish and reef keeping community. Make sure to revisit our Ick and Velvet sit-down we had 2 weeks ago with Reef Vet Dr. Alex J. Hall. There you will find warranted information from a certified aquatic veterinarian. You can find that video by following the link on the screen or in the description below.
So, with all that information, I wish you guys good luck, healthy fish. If you like and value this information, and it's going to get more and more advanced as we go along, dealing with each individual species and which species are copper sensitive and how to deal with that, and whether we should use chloroquine instead of copper or go for formalin right away. These are going to be the issues we discuss as we get further along in this series. We're going to have guest vets on, and we're going to have guys that do this for a living. So please like and subscribe, hit that bell, join up for the YouTube. Thank you.